Walk through Paris today and a market feels curated, almost designed for your comfort. You'll see neat rows of organized stalls, clear prices displayed on professional signs, clean counters wiped down regularly to meet health standards. Everything feels controlled, predictable, safe. But if we could step back to the late 1600s to experience a Paris market as it truly existed then, we'd find something entirely different. The markets of 1680 were raw, unfiltered spaces, crowded to the point of claustrophobia, and absolutely unavoidable if you wanted to eat. In this video, I'm using modern artificial intelligence tools to bring historical images, documents, and records to life, reconstructing scenes with careful attention to accuracy, too. But my goal isn't to polish the past or make it prettier than it was. Instead, I want to step with you into a normal market day, completely ordinary for the people who lived it, and experience how people actually lived within this essential but chaotic space. This is Paris in the year 1680, during the reign of Louis XIV, when France dominates European culture and politics. The city itself is already bursting far beyond its old medieval walls and limits. Hundreds of thousands of people, estimates suggest around 500,000, share impossibly narrow streets, compete for limited food supplies, and generate constant noise that never fully stops, even in the deepest hours of night. Markets in this Paris are not occasional events that you might visit when convenient. They are not leisure activities or pleasant weekend outings. These markets are daily pressure points where the city's survival is negotiated transaction by transaction. They are economic battlegrounds where every family fights for access to basic necessities. If you eat, and everyone must eat, you come here. There is no alternative system, no grocery stores with stocked shelves, no delivery services, no way to simply order what you need from the comfort of home. The market is mandatory participation in the economy of survival. Before noon arrives, sometimes as early as dawn, the streets surrounding the market begin to thicken with activity. Carts loaded with goods jam the narrow passageways, creating bottlenecks where movement slows to a frustrating crawl. People squeeze past each other in spaces barely wide enough for one person, much less the crowds that actually fill them. Personal space is a luxury that doesn't exist here. Goods are stacked wherever space allows, against walls, in doorways, on improvised wooden platforms, sometimes just directly on the muddy or dusty ground. There is no single entrance to this market, no official gate or checkpoint where you pass from not market to market. There is no fixed layout that remains consistent from day to day. The market doesn't have architects or planners designing its organization. Instead, the market forms itself organically, differently every single day, responding to who arrives first, what goods are available, where carts can physically fit, and how the crowd naturally flows. It's a living, breathing thing that assembles itself each morning and dissolves each evening, leaving almost no trace except the waste that inevitably accumulates. Most sellers standing behind these stalls or sitting beside their goods are not professional merchants by choice or training. They're not people who dreamed of commercial success or studied the art of trade. Many are widows who lost their husbands to illness, accident, or war, and who now must somehow generate income without any formal trade or inheritance. Others are seasonal laborers who work harvests when available, but must find other ways to earn during slack periods. Many are families supplementing whatever meager income they can earn from other sources, craft work, manual labor, domestic service, by selling whatever they can produce or acquire. The pressure on these sellers is immense and constant. They must sell their goods quickly, ideally in the early morning when buyers are most active and products are freshest, or they risk losing money entirely. A bad morning, where few buyers appear or prices must be dropped significantly to attract interest, can mean food spoils by afternoon before it can be sold. Spoiled food means no profit at all. In fact, it means a loss, because resources were invested in acquiring or producing goods that ultimately generated nothing. Time works against these sellers every single hour. Bread grows stale, milk sours, vegetables wilt, meat begins to smell. Every passing hour reduces value, increases risk, and threatens the seller's ability to buy tomorrow's goods. Buyers arrive at this market with deep caution, born from hard experience. They know that every transaction is a negotiation, every price is a starting position, and every seller has an interest in maximizing profit that may not align with the buyer's interest in maximizing value. Coins are counted carefully before making any purchase. In an economy where most people handle very little actual money, where a single sou might represent hours of work, mathematical precision matters enormously. Weights are questioned routinely and openly. Buyers watch sellers closely as goods are measured, ready to challenge any thumb pressed subtly on the scale or any sleight of hand that might short the agreed-upon quantity. Hands press fruit to test firmness, an indicator of freshness and how long the food might remain edible. Bread is examined for proper texture and smell. Fish are inspected for clear eyes and red gills. Every sense is deployed in the effort to distinguish fresh from spoiled, quality from inferior. Arguments are extremely common throughout the market, creating a constant background noise of negotiation and dispute. But these arguments aren't primarily expressions of anger or personal conflict, though those elements certainly appear. Rather, they're expressions of necessity. Every household operates within strict financial limits. Paying too much for one item means having less for another necessity. Being cheated means genuine hardship. So buyers argue, loudly and persistently, not from rudeness, but from the practical need to protect resources that cannot be replaced. Waste builds quickly in this densely packed environment, and there is no organized system for managing it effectively. Animals, horses pulling carts, pigs being led to slaughter, chickens in cages, dogs wandering freely, pass through the market constantly, leaving their waste wherever it falls. Food scraps drop to the ground throughout the day. Vegetable trimmings, spoiled portions cut away from better pieces, bones, fish heads, countless other organic materials that simply accumulate underfoot. Water used for washing or displayed for sale is often reused multiple times, growing progressively more contaminated with each use. Illness moves easily through places like this crowded market where thousands of people gather in close proximity, touching the same goods, breathing the same air, with no understanding of germ theory or disease transmission. Contaminated food and water cause regular outbreaks of intestinal diseases. Respiratory illnesses spread from person to person with devastating efficiency. But despite these health risks, which are obvious even to people who don't understand their microbial causes, the market does not pause. It cannot pause. The city must eat. Sellers must earn. Buyers must purchase. The cycle continues regardless of risk because the alternative, starvation, is more immediately threatening than the possibility of illness. People living in this environment learn through painful experience which risks they can survive and which they cannot afford to avoid. They develop practical rules based on observation. Avoid meat that smells wrong. Don't buy from sellers with obvious sores. Prefer food from familiar vendors whose track record suggests reliability. These rules aren't always effective, but they're the best protection available. Children are absolutely everywhere throughout this market, visible in every direction at every moment. Some are helping their families directly, carrying baskets that look impossibly heavy for their small frames, moving through the crowd with practiced efficiency. Others run messages between stalls or between the market and nearby homes, serving as communication networks in an era without any electronic messaging. Some watch over stalls while adults step away briefly for necessary breaks, their young eyes scanning for potential thieves. For many children, especially those from poorer families, the market functions as a classroom, more important than any formal education they might receive. In this crowded, noisy space, they learn the practical mathematics that will govern their entire lives. They learn prices before they learn letters, absorbing the relative value of different goods through constant observation. They learn negotiation before they learn formal arithmetic, watching how adults argue over pennies and understanding that the stated price is rarely the final price. They also learn social hierarchies, seeing who commands respect and who must plead for consideration. They learn to read faces, to distinguish honest merchants from dishonest ones, to identify the signs of desperation that might make a seller vulnerable to aggressive bargaining. These are the real skills that will determine their survival in an urban economy that offers limited opportunities for formal advancement. Buyers arrive at this market with deep caution born from hard experience. They know that every transaction is a negotiation. As the day wears on and afternoon approaches, the market undergoes a noticeable transformation in both atmosphere and function. Voices that were energetic and competitive in the morning now grow tired, losing their sharp edge. Bodies are fatigued from hours of standing, lifting, negotiating, and constant alertness. Prices soften noticeably as sellers become increasingly motivated to move remaining inventory rather than carry it home or watch it spoil overnight. Those buyers who deliberately waited, gambling that afternoon would bring better prices, now take their chances on what remains. Sometimes this strategy succeeds, yielding good food at reduced cost. Sometimes it fails, leaving the late buyer with inferior goods or nothing at all if their budget can't stretch to meet even the discounted prices. Those sellers who successfully sold their goods early in the day, when prices were highest and selection was best, leave quietly, satisfied with their profit and eager to escape the exhausting environment. Those whose goods moved slowly, or not at all, face difficult decisions about how low to drop prices, whether to give away spoiling food, or whether to carry it home hoping tomorrow brings better fortune. By mid to late afternoon, the market is already dissolving, a reversal of the morning's formation. Stalls are dismantled, remaining goods are packed away. People drift back into the maze of streets that created the market in the first place, dispersing back into their individual lives until tomorrow's cycle begins again. Today, when tourists visit Paris, markets are among the most celebrated attractions. They're photographed constantly, featured in guidebooks and social media posts. They're romanticized as authentic glimpses of French culture, charming examples of traditional commerce persisting in a modern world. But in 1680, this was not charming atmosphere designed for aesthetic appreciation. This was exposure in its rawest form. Every transaction happened in public, visible to dozens or hundreds of witnesses. Every negotiation was overheard. Every argument was watched. Every mistake, paying too much, accepting spoiled goods, being visibly cheated, stayed visible, becoming part of your reputation in a community where reputation might be your most valuable asset. This was daily life negotiated out loud, with no privacy, no protection, no ability to hide failures or struggles. The market exposed everyone's economic status, their negotiating skills, their judgment, their desperation, or security. Nothing could be concealed in this transparent economy of survival. No one present in this 1680 Paris market believed they were participating in something historic. That thought wouldn't have occurred to them. They were thinking about food, how to get enough, how to prepare it, how to make it last. They were thinking about money, whether they had enough, whether they were spending it wisely, whether they could earn more tomorrow. They were thinking about making tomorrow easier than today, hoping that each day's struggle might somehow lead to improvement, knowing that for most people, improvement never really comes. If there's another place you'd like me to reconstruct with this level of detail, another everyday moment from the past you'd like to step into and experience, or another aspect of historical daily life you want to understand more deeply, leave your suggestion in the comments below. I'll continue bringing these forgotten moments back into view. making the ordinary lives of the past visible again. Thanks for watching.